1874, the podcast with Dan Bardell and Gregg Evans.
Hello, welcome back to 1874, the podcast. I'm your host, Dan Bardell, joined by the Athletics' Gregg Evans to discuss Luton Town 2, Aston Villa 3 and everything else around Aston Villa Football Club. This show is in association with NordVPN, and if you want to find out a little bit more about them, you'll find out later on in the show, but also you can go down on the YouTube video and wherever you're taking in this podcast and read some information in the description. Now, Greg, first off, we need to apologise for the audio of last week's show. Neither of us really have a clue what happened. That's never happened before, and we didn't manage to ever do anything about it. So sorry for those that heard me very, very loud and then heard Greg very, very quietly. I did say on another show that if you just turned me up to the nice kind of volume, then you'd have been getting the best of the podcast, because Greg never makes any really good points. Anyway, but I will say Greg sent me some notes before this show, and he has got some interesting tidbits off the back of the game. So let's start the show. Greg, how are you first?
I'm good, thanks, Dan. Yeah, very good, thanks. And sorry about last week for all those who are listening who didn't hear me. For those who didn't hear me, I've been saying for the last couple of weeks that I think it's getting easier and easier for Villa to finish in the top four, or definitely the top five. And I'm going to say that again this week, and hopefully you can hear it me loud and clear. But yeah, another good positive week for Villa. Heading towards I think a season-defining period now. If Villa can get through the games against Ajax, the game against Tottenham on Sunday, then I think supporters can start to really, really enjoy this season rather than fear the remaining games.
Yeah, you feel like off the back of the weekend that fifth is going to be the lowest that Villa are going to fall now. Obviously, the way the results have transpired in recent weeks, with Villa picking up 2 wins and Manchester United losing twice. They almost have to win 10 out of 11 now, don't they? And Villa probably only need 5 out of 11. To secure this, and you'd feel the way the team's been all season and ever since Emery walked through the door, you kind of feel they're more than capable of that. But also in the back of your mind, you do remember this is Aston Villa, and as brilliant as they've been under Unai Emery, they've hurt me many times before.
Yes, I said a month ago, Villa needed 10 out of the 15 games that they had left at that point to pretty much what I thought would be guaranteed themselves a top 5 position. They've won 3 in a row. I think they need probably 5 out of the last 10, is it, or 5 out of the last 11? I think that should be enough. Man United, that means Man United would have to go and probably win 9 or 10 out of the 11, and I just don't see them doing it. I think there are some signs of improvement at United. I think, again, like Villa, they've been unfortunate with injuries. If they had their first choice centre back pairing, I think they'd be a much stronger outfit, but I just don't see the consistency there. I feel like they're relying on magical moments to get them out of games, and you look at the two teams compared to how Man United are playing and how Villa are playing, they just seem a distance apart for me.
I think they're absolutely awful. And even though they were 1-0 up for a long period of the game yesterday, I was never concerned that Manchester City wouldn't beat them. I mean, Steven Gerrard may as well be the manager with the magic moments, waiting for the moments of magic. And in fairness, Rashford did provide one yesterday, but they did very little else, Manchester United. And I think Ten Hag will be gone at the end of the season, is my personal opinion. But I think Villa are far and away the better football team than Manchester United. And I cannot believe they took 6 points off us.
It's amazing, really, isn't it?
Unbelievable.
Yeah, it's amazing. And when you look at the performance, the performance against Man United, the home game, Villa were probably better than they have been collectively over the last 3 games. I thought Villa were amazing against Nottingham Forest in the first half. Thought they were equally as good against Luton in the first half, but the overall 90-minute performance, wasn't quite there. But they are just ruthless winners at the moment. They go on and get the job done regardless. So, I just see a different team there, Villa and Tottenham, to be honest, compared to Manchester United.
Yeah.
And look, yes, to be fair to them though, Man United, and we won't dwell on them too much. They were always probably going to lose yesterday, weren't they? Didn't ever envisage them taking points off Manchester City, so can't really judge on that performance alone. But they've got a lot to do to catch Villa.
Yeah, and Villa were brilliant in the first half against Luton. We can ask questions about the second half performance, and we will, but that shouldn't
And we
take
will,
away.
yeah.
That shouldn't take away from the fact in the first half, I thought Villa were absolutely brilliant, execute everything with precision. Look, just a really good team, full of confidence. Ollie Watkins scoring all types of different finishes. He really is the complete striker at the moment. But you notice some subtle tweaks to Emery's system in this one, Greg?
Yeah, well, I mean, it was pretty clear, wasn't it, from I think the first sort of couple of minutes, really. As soon as Emi Martinez was playing out from the back, it was a very similar build-up out of defence.
Oh dear,
excuse me.
unprofessional.
That's a Facebook call. I haven't had one of those for a while.
You can't turn it to a podcast dressed in your best shirt, Greg, and then have your phone going off unprofessional. It's no good looking professional if you're not going to.
This is one of the worst, believe it or not. Yeah, we'll move on from that. But yeah, I thought Villa were different in the way they were building out from the back. It was very much the same. Martinez spreading it to one of the centre halves, and then a couple of passes between them in defence, and then bang straight up to Watkins, bypassing the midfield. A little bit different, as we see previously. Villa tend to use McGinn or Ramsey or Luiz or Kamara when he plays to gradually build up. It was more drag Watkins to either side of the channels, get the ball into his feet, and that's a little bit different, really, because what we've seen with Watkins, under Emery, he stays very central. He wasn't doing that at the weekend. He was all over the place, and he really set the tone early on in that game, up against three centre halves, had them all running scared. And
his hold-up play was excellent as well.
It was fantastic, and I think that's what that's one of the things that went kind of unnoticed, because he scored 2 goals. So everyone starts talking about the 2 goals, but they didn't see the actual overall impact he had in that first half. He was brilliant, and the midfield players, Ramsey most notably until he got injured, were working really closely and tightly to him, and it was working. But then in the second half, it didn't quite work, and the ball. It wasn't sticking as much. I mean, he hardly had a touch in the second half, did he, Watkins? And that plan just didn't quite work. Needed a bit more from the midfield, and it was a real tough afternoon, I think, for Morgan Rodgers. We'll get on to him in a bit. I thought he was pretty good on the ball, but out of possession, pretty much all over the shop, to be honest. Which is understandable for new players coming into Villa, because they are going to be receiving more direction and coaching and tactical demands than probably they've ever faced previously. So, he's going to take a little bit of time to get used to, in the same way that Moreno did, if you remember those early games. Defensively struggled a little bit. But there were some bright signs when he was on the ball, but yeah, he struggled a little bit. And as we've seen in the second half, which we'll get on to, all of Luton's play came down that side, didn't it? And it was a little bit to do with him.
Yeah, I mean, I suppose the big news before the game was that Torres and Konsa were going to be back in the squad. We actually called it correctly on the preview show. We get a few things right on the preview show. Dave Reid and myself said that perhaps Torres would sit this one out and Konsa would come straight back in, because he feels the more durable of the 2 players at the moment. Konsa, despite the fact he's been injured, he's come back has been later than Pau Torres is, but it was Konsa that came back in. It was good to see him back, and in the first half, Villa looked just comfortable all over the pitch. Not so much in the second half, but it's good to have Konsa and Torres back in the squad now, especially ahead of this big week that you've alluded to already.
Yeah, because the squad's going to need to be used now. It's not a case of the same players are going to be playing every week, every single game. You can't do it. I look back to the start of the season when Villa were probably getting their best results when they were playing the Sunday to Thursday. They were grinding it out, but that was the start of the season when they were a little bit fresher. They've had a long run of games now, a lot of football. The squad's decimated. That Emery's probably getting more out of the players than he thought he would at this point in time.
Yeah.
Because, he's having to play them for sort of 75, 80 minutes, the majority of them most weeks. So 4 games in 2 weeks, the squad's going to need to be used. You cannot play the same centre-backs for 90 minutes every single game. So it'd be interesting to see whether Torres comes in, whether they stick with Longley and Konsa. I thought Konsa was great on the ball. We'd probably look back at the goals and feel a little bit disappointed with them, but great to have him back. And if that was a tiny bit of rustiness in his defensive play, for the goals, then we know that he's going to iron those out in the games and weeks ahead. Probably just a tiny bit of rustiness having not played for a few weeks.
I guess as well that's happened now, and Villa have got away with it. So he's had that rustiness, and Villa have still won the game. Which people all over will evaluate the game, and there was some bad things in the game. There was also some brilliant things in the first half. But the ultimate thing is that they've gone on and found a way to win the game, and that's what good teams do. You have to debrief afterwards and look at what's gone wrong. But the biggest thing, don't be disappointed with the second half, because Villa have won the game, and that was absolutely what's needed. We touched on Morgan Rodgers as well. It's a shame because Jacob Ramsey was having a good game. I felt like he was due a goal, and I felt like the goal was going to come in that game. He came close with a great save from Kaminsky. He was just linking up with Watkins really well, carrying the ball really well with that close control that we've all grown to love over the last few years. That makes him such a unique footballer. The way he glides with the ball, I felt like that was starting to come back. And then again, he's gone down with an injury. And, I'm not a physio, not a doctor. It did look suspiciously like it could be the old metatarsal again.
Yeah, we'll wait and see. It's obviously not our position to say that. We'll wait and see what the club tell us on that in the days ahead. Fingers crossed, it's nothing serious, and we see more of Jacob Ramsey.
He did carry on, didn't he? He did carry on for a bit.
Yeah, and then he went off a little bit later. And yeah, I'm glad you mentioned that chance, because it was one of the things that I really picked out of the game. There were two things that stood out for me in the first half. The first bit was how Villa were winning, and I mentioned this last week. How Villa continue to win the ball in really dangerous areas, and are doing that really, really well now. And John McGinn kind of set the tone early in this game, and won back possession quite early on. And then I think he did it again in the build up to Ramsey's chance. No, sorry, I'm mistaken on that. It was a ball out from the back, Martinez in a build up, really nice build up. Louise and McGinn sort of rode stride forward, and then Ramsey had his chance. And the other thing I wanted to mention was I think that Villa now have a really, really talented midfield of ball carriers, where we're way past the stage now where we're talking about they still need to replace Jack Grealish. They still need somebody who's got the ball carrying qualities like him. Individually, all of them aren't quite as good as Jack Grealish on the ball, but collectively now they're brilliant. You look at how Douglas Luiz can burst out, beat a man, and quickly break the lines. The same with McGinn, and the same with Ramsey. And I think that's what's making Villa such a threat in these early halves. They're in the first half of games. They're just bombarding through opponents with their the way they can build from back to front so quickly. It's a joy to watch.
Tight spaces as well. You think of players like Louise, McGinn, Leon Bailey, Ramsey as well. They're all good in tight spaces. So not only are they good when they've got ground in front of them to run into, but they can also manipulate the ball in those tight spaces and get through. And you just do feel now like Villa have got so much in their armoury going forward, because they're really good at building up from the back when it comes to passing. Like you've just said, there's players that build from the back as well. There's goal scorers throughout the team, because there's a few players now approaching or in double figures. There's a lot of different threats there. I'm not saying Villa are the complete team, and obviously they play very, very different to the type of football that Manchester City play. There's very few weaknesses in Villa going forward. We look ahead to the summer, and where are Villa going to improve their first 11? There's not loads of places where you look at it and think, I think we can get a much better player in that position, no. if any at all.
No, and it's really difficult because the grass isn't always greener. The players that you bring in aren't always better than the players that you're replacing. And Villa might look at positions, or might look at players, or might look at a certain number of players. They might think that they have 14 really good players and they maybe need 16. But, are those 14th and 15th players that they're going to get in any better, or are they going to get in a wide player or a left back or a right back or whatever, any position you can think of that they're going to get a better player? It's really difficult. And the one thing I was thinking about earlier actually was it would be a shame if the Ajax game, for example, didn't quite go to plan and Villa went out of Europe now, because I think this is the time Villa need to go and win something, regardless of what the reputation of the Europa Conference League is at this stage. They need to go on and win something, and that's the only chance they've got this season now. So they really need to go and win that, I think. And it'll be a shame if it ended in these next games. But I do think finishing in the top four or the Champions League, however that comes, is more important, because if Villa do get Champions League qualification, there is not going to be one player in that team that wants to move. In a similar way to Newcastle, when Newcastle qualified last year, those Newcastle players thinking, this is a club on the up. We're going to stick around. We're going to enjoy this Champions League campaign, and we're going to see where this club kicks on to. And obviously, it can bring in better players as well. Now, you look at it in comparison with West Ham. West Ham win the Europa Conference League, but they don't qualify for the Champions League. Never really stood a chance, did they, in the season? Declan Rice moves on to Arsenal because he wants to go on to this bigger club. Now, we know that Arsenal are interested in Douglas Luiz and has been, but Douglas Luiz that bothered about moving to Arsenal when Villa are in this kind of form? I don't see it. And I think you can look across the board to that now, whereas players will be attracting interest from so-called bigger clubs, but there aren't going to be many, I think, that are really interested in moving because Villa are very much on the up. So just to go back to your point, about Villa as a team, there aren't many weaknesses. There aren't. And, you've got to hope that Emery and his team get it right in the transfer window and they bring in the right players to make Villa better. But it's just not that easy, is it? Because we thought Newcastle might do that last year and they've had a difficult season. So, the Premier League's ruthless and really tough.
Yeah, we could do with the PSR rules being relaxed slightly. There was talk of them being relaxed ever so slightly. I haven't seen anything about that since, kind of going back to the old FFP stuff rather than PSR, but we'll have to keep our eye on that one. I think for me, I'd love Villa to win a trophy. I've said this countless times. I've been on TalkSport loads recently saying this kind of thing. But fourth is huge. Fifth could be huge. But, Villa get in the Champions League. That does far more for you than a football club than winning the Europa Conference League. Yes, it's brilliant to get to a final. Yes, it's brilliant to win a trophy. But for the long-term future of Aston Villa, keeping hold of players, bringing a better quality of player in increasing revenue, becoming like a global brand, essentially, to sound like Chris Heck, which I don't really want to do. It's so important for Villa to get into the Champions League and have those games. And yes, we could win the Europa Conference League and it'd be brilliant. And, we might well do both, but I don't want that to come at the expense of coming forth. I can almost Martin O'Neill it. I can take it or leave it. The Conference League at this point, the big thing for me is as a football club, getting to the Champions League would be absolutely huge.
Yes, as the supporters, they want to go and win a trophy, don't they? Nothing will feel better than winning in Athens. Yeah, it is Athens, isn't it? Yeah, nothing will feel better than winning in Athens for those fans that are there, and if it happens, it will be absolutely amazing and something that the younger generation who haven't seen Villa win anything, something they can hold on to for a very, very long time. You look at how quickly football moves on and changes. I mean, Leicester, Leicester won the Premier League, they won the FA Cup, they got into the Champions League. They've had everything really in terms of what a so-called Big Four or top six club were aspiring to. But you just feel like Villa, with the backing that they've got now, the bigger fan base, the sort of history and the tradition, they're just a bigger club, aren't they? I know it's just I hate having to label clubs smaller or bigger, but we've got to be real, haven't we? Villa are a bigger club than Leicester, and you'd feel like they would have a better chance of sustaining it. But I'm not. I don't know. You just got to take it as it comes, hasn't you? And just try and keep winning games and see where that takes them.
Yeah, let's get back to the game then. Morgan Rodgers came on for Jacob Ramsey. First half, I thought he was really good, really involved in the game, and kind of picked up where Jacob Ramsey left off. And actually, I was watching him and thinking, I've said a few weeks ago that I don't think Villa have many players that are the same or similar. Like if someone's out, they can't replace them with the same type of player. I think Villa have got quite a unique squad in the way that it's been built and the type of player that they've identified and brought into the football club. But when I watched Rodgers in the first half, I sat there and actually thought he's got a few similar facets to Jacob Ramsey. Actually, that could be quite useful, especially as Ramsey has struggled so much with injury. But you're in the second half when the tide had turned against Villa, as you've already said. It was a struggle for him, but also I would say that is natural because he hasn't had the time to get with Emery's methods that all the other players have had.
Yeah, definitely. We're certainly not. I'm certainly not knocking him. It is most amount of minutes in a game, so he'll be pleased with that so far. He's know that he's settling in well, and he's starting to find his way at Villa. As with all new players, they have a little bit more work to do to get used to what Emery wants, what the other coaches want from them, what they have to do in possession and out of possession. Most importantly, out of possession, because we know that he's a very talented boy in possession. He's got to learn about what it's like to play for Villa and what he's got to do out of possession, because that's where it was clear that he struggled against Luton. I think what we got to also remember is that he's stepping up from the Championship as well. Never played Premier League football, so Villa have had a lot of these stories now. They've brought Ollie Watkins in, and they've brought Matty Cash in, and they brought one more from the Championship.
Conser had never played.
As your Conser, yeah. So, there's a history. And Tyrone Mings to an extent as well. I think he'd only played 6 games in the Premier League for Bournemouth. So, was unproven at that level. So Villa have shown that they are a club who can bring players in from the second tier and make them into proper Premier League players, because all of those players that we've mentioned previously now are internationals and are proven Premier League players. So perhaps Morgan Rodgers can do this now, but we've just got to give him a little bit of time. He's going to need that. And is the Ajax game a good opportunity for him to start? Possibly. Yeah. Feel like maybe Zaniolo might be more beneficial because he's got that little bit more know-how, a little bit older, a little bit more experience in Europe. Might work better, but equally it might be a good chance to give Rodgers some more minutes on the back of his game against Luton.
One thing I say about Rodgers is every time he's been on the pitch, whether it's been for the longer time that he was on against Luton or the shorter burst that he's had in the other 2 games that he's come on, I think it was Sheffield United and Forest, in every game, he's had a chance.
He's had a chance,
got himself in a position to have a chance, and I think that's a really positive sign.
Yeah. As I say, I don't think there was any issue with him going forward. Thought he was good in possession. It was just when he had to do the defensive duties. He was leaving his defenders a little bit exposed at times. Committed a few too many fouls, which became a theme of Villa's play. I've seen a lot of people mentioning about the problem and the difficulty at defensive set pieces at the moment, and maybe we can get onto that in a bit.
Yeah,
but
we will.
Rodgers made a couple of. Rodgers fouled a couple of times in what was a recurring theme for Villa from about the 44th, 45th minute. They kept fouling and they kept giving away stupid free kicks and corners. And Villa committed more fouls, 19, in that game than they did in any other game previously. So they were just asking for trouble almost. And in some ways, it was not quite as bad because this was a dreadful, dreadful day. But it reminded me a little bit of the opening day of the season at Bournemouth under Gerrard, when Villa were playing against man mountains in Kiefer Moore and Phil Billing and others. And the message before the game was, don't give away set pieces, don't give away stupid fouls, because these guys are very tall. They're going to cause problems, and Bournemouth scored both of their goals through set pieces. I remember Kamara on that day, on his debut, was giving away just foul after foul after foul. And when I was watching the game, it started to feel like that. I was like, what are you doing? Why do you keep fouling? Inevitably, you're going to give Luton chances. They've scored 46% of their goals this season through set pieces. And if you foul them 19 times, they're going to have more chances to score. So yeah, okay, disappointing to concede from 2 set pieces, but I think there's a lot of context that's needed, and maybe we'll get into that shortly.
Yeah, the first half, Villa in the half 2-0 up. Ollie Watkins with 2 goals, one from a set piece, which was nice to see. Well worked. The second one just timed his run to absolute perfection. Even the linesman didn't realise how well he timed his run. I'd say he looked onside live straight away. I thought he's on there. And he's took it really. He's took it really, really nice. He had another one that he's flashed across the goal that's hit the post. Could have really had a first half hat trick, Ollie Watkins. But I think injuries taken into account, as long as he stays fit, I think it's safe to say that in 12 months' time, Ollie Watkins is going to be Villa's record Premier League goal scorer, and his record in terms of productivity this season, and his record overall under Unai Emery. He's in my all-time Villa 11 now, Ollie Watkins. He's alongside Dwight York. He's taken Benteke's place in my 11.
Yeah, he's doing great. Really happy for him because he's on top of him being a great footballer. He's a really nice lad as well. So really pleased for him. His 2 goals were brilliant. That both from set pieces. That made Villa have now scored 20 goals from set pieces. The first club in Europe to do that in all competitions. So really impressive. The attacking work that the players are doing with Emery and Austin McPhee, the set piece specialist, clearly really working. Lovely goal, lovely header for the first, and a brilliant run for that second. And just Douglas Luiz, great vision. We've seen him in recent weeks, haven't we, with some of those passes that he can make. Just great to have in the team.
Yeah, two lovely guys. I mean, we have done Ollie Watkins to absolute death, so we won't do it now. But he somehow just keeps getting better and better and getting more finishes into his armoury. He really is superb, and like I say, up there now as one of my favourite strikers ever to play for the football club. We'll talk about the second half shortly, but before we do that, let's hear a little bit more about our sponsors, NordVPN. 74 is proudly sponsored by NordVPN, so when and you can't watch it, we want to help you. NordVPN is a secure and private service which works on pretty much any device, including your laptop, mobile, and television. So if you want to watch some live content, it allows you to appear like you're in another country. And whilst you're connected, no one else can find out what you're doing, including your internet service provider. Beyond this, the service also has threat protection baked in to protect you from intrusive website ads and malware, which is pretty handy for you. As part of NordVPN support performance for free, this also includes Nord's 30-day money-back guarantee. All you've got to do is go to 1874.io/NordVPN and sign up. All the details are also in the description. As always, we're very grateful to anyone that signs up. We know that money is tight, but if you think NordVPN will help you out, it will also help keep the channel running and help us too. Thank you to NordVPN for continuing to back the podcast. It was very much a game of two halves, Greg, to use that old cliche. I'm the kind of person that, I will try and steer away from the negative from Villa's point of view, and that there was negatives. But sometimes you have to just say, the other team was really, really good, and Luton have done that a few times in games. I remember them being 3-0 down to Chelsea at one point and coming back and very nearly getting it back to 3-3 over the Christmas period. Now, this is a position at home Luton have been at many times, but they go down with a fight. They don't just lie down and let you batter them. And they did come out in the second half and were a completely different team. Did score 2 goals from set pieces, but their general play in the second half, they were the better team.
Yeah, they went for it, didn't they? They made the change on the right-hand side, their right-hand side, which made a bit of a difference, I thought. It felt like they kind of moved from 3 defenders into 2 and pushed up a bit more. Barkley got more involved. He's having a decent season, isn't he?
Really
I have to admit that, when he was at Villa, I thought his time was up really in the Premier League. I didn't think we'd see him shining like the way he is now, but he's fair play to him. He's having a good season. And yeah, Luton, they never give up. They've scored in every single home game except for one. The type of play that they're going to go for. They're going to put lots of crosses into the box. They always tend to do that at home. They're going to work off set pieces because that's, their players typically aren't quite as good as other players in other teams. So they've got to look at creative ways to get advantages. Set pieces seems to be an area for them with Alfie Doughty. He's a set piece specialist. And I was just watching that game and I was getting a bit frustrated with Villa because I thought you're giving this guy the chance. You keep conceding corners, keep conceding fouls, and allowing Luton free kicks. Eventually one of these crosses he's gonna pay because Luton have scored 46% of their goals through set pieces. So Villa typically until the last couple of weeks, months, maybe 2 months, haven't really conceded that many from set pieces. If you look at the stats now, corners seems to be the issue. So Villa have conceded 10 goals from corners. There's no getting away from that. The cold, hard statistics don't look great in that respect because only Nottingham Forest and Burnley have conceded the same. So they're the joint worst in the division from conceding corners. But I've been saying this for a couple of weeks now. I do feel like they are getting a bit unlucky. They're not first contact goals. There's not a structural problem there. If you break down the goal, Villa are very competitive, aren't they? It's not like, usually we're talking about a brilliant clearance off the line by Cash, a great save by Martinez, but somehow they've bundled it in. So it's a little bit messy, admittedly, but they're very, very competitive in what they're doing. So I don't think there's a structural problem there. But the context to it, I think you've got to look at, one, Villa are a very short side. You go through, forget Martinez and the centre-backs. You then look at Moreno, Watkins, Tielemans, McGinn, Diaby, Baylor. They're relatively small players, aren't they? So they're going to be up against it. They've lost Tyrone Mings from the very start of the season, who wins more first contact headers than anybody in that squad. So the tactic typically that Villa tend to use is, right, well, we're quite a short side. So let's allow Emi Martinez plenty of room to come out and be commanding. It's not a case of Emi Martinez looking around and thinking, we're struggling here, I'm going to have to sort something out. It's a proper tactic. Give Martinez the freedom to come and collect the crosses, and you've seen that in the second half a couple of times, particularly towards the end. Really impressive. I think we need to move away from this narrative that without Martinez, Villa are going to be struggling from set pieces, because it's a tactic that they're going for. So, yes, they're conceding quite a lot from corners. It's more in recent weeks, but look at the numbers. Villa's average, I think, from the average amount of corners Villa concede per game this season is something like 4.2 or 4.3. Yeah, in recent games, conceded 8 against Luton, 8 against Manchester United, 7 against Newcastle, 7 against Brentford. So that's almost double the average. Now, if you concede double the amount, inevitably you're going to concede chances. And if you're playing against Luton, who score 46% of their goals through set pieces, they're going to have very good chances from set pieces and probably score. Now, Villa lost 2 goals through set pieces. The second goal's crap. I think they'll be really disappointed. It's they're trying to play the high line, aren't they? And it didn't work. It's a bad one to concede. But look back through all the corners. There aren't many first contacts. There's Shah when he scored his second one, I think, against for Newcastle, and I think there's one more. But there are plenty of unlucky ones. The Lo Celso one for Tottenham, it was from outside the box. The one against Brentford, outside the box.
Liverpool.
Szoboszlai, wasn't it? Yeah, outside the box. They're just getting a bit unlucky, and supporters maybe are jumping on this, saying, well, we're conceding so many goals from set pieces, it's a bit of a bother, but they're winning games. Like, a supporter's looking at the fact that they're conceding 2 goals every game, and is that a concern? Villa are outscoring their set pieces. Villa are scoring more from set pieces than conceding. So why is it an issue? I don't get it, but no. I understand it's frustrating.
You want to knock it out, don't you? You don't want it to keep
happening. Of course. And Emery will be looking at it thinking, why is this happening? Because he's a perfectionist. But if Villa are winning games, they're scoring more from set pieces than conceding. I don't see it being a major problem. I mean, we could look at another area in the game that's becoming a bit of a concern, isn't it? And it's like the 45th to the 65th minute. Why do Villa keep conceding after that period? If we're looking at conceding from corners as an example, why do they keep conceding between 45 and 65 minutes? Because the majority of their goals this season have gone from that period. So I just think sometimes, as football fans, we try to pick the negatives too often. And Villa are having a great season. Yes, they want to eradicate a few problems, but I don't see it being a massive issue right now. I think it's just, in context, they're conceding more corners, which means they're going to concede more goals eventually. And it's just something that's happened in more recent times. It's not a thing over the course of the season.
I think sometimes you got to look at the tail of the tape, and you're right. Villa scored a goal from a set piece. So Luton. Well, yeah. I find it hard to count the second one, but you're right. Villa scored 2 goals from the set piece. The Luton fans will be disappointed with that. Rob Edwards will be disappointed with that. You got to look at the tail of the tape as well. I think Villa were dealing with set pieces really, really well up until the first one Luton scored. And then from that moment, it does change how players feel. It does become psychological. Once you've conceded one from a set piece and you've been on a little bit of a bad run of conceding from a set pieces, it does become psychological. And Villa had dealt with them really well, I thought, throughout the game up until that point. I mean, they could have had another one off a set piece as well that flashed across the goal. So I do think the momentum of the game and it did change. And I think, as I said, Villa, up until that first goal, were dealing with set pieces really, really well. And that was something I'd noticed. But then suddenly, every set piece looked like it was going to be a goal. But you're right, they were giving away too many. So it was inevitable.
And that's the point I'm trying to make. From 44 minutes, if the game changed, Villa started conceding more corners. They started fouling more often. So from between 44 minutes and the 7 minutes of extra time in the first half, so 44 minutes to 52 minutes, and then from 45 to 64 minutes, that period in the second half, Villa faced about 9-10 either free kicks or corners into the box against a team who are very good from set pieces. Inevitably, something's going to happen, isn't it? So that's what I was kind of thinking when I was watching the game. Like, why are you bringing this pressure on yourselves almost? And they did defend. They did deal with it quite well. And you look on 84, 85 minutes, it was almost a repeat of the second goal, wasn't it? With the exact same cross from the exact same position from Doughty. But this time Morris was offside and he put it wide. But that's the defence working, that high line working.
Yeah, it works.
And so, they are learning from their mistakes in that respect. But if it continues, it's going to frustrate supporters. If it continues, it's going to frustrate Emery, the players, Austin McPhee, everyone associated with Villa. But right now, they've scored 20 goals this season through set pieces. That's a bigger story for me than the amount they're conceding.
Yeah, and Villa made 4 subs in reaction to the game going level. And spoiler alert, I mean, sure, everyone knows, Villa went on to win the game. It's not something we've seen too much from Emery bringing on 4 subs, but it was nice that they won the game with 2 subs combining. I mean, this is the first time all season we've had 2 left-backs to pick from, because one of them's been injured throughout the entirety of the season. But it was good to see Diaby get that assist as well. It's a really good run and good header from Luca Dean as well. And scenes in that away. And I haven't watched Max's video.
I did this morning. Yeah. Blimey, that looked good fun.
I bet it was. I think he said it was his favourite away day ever. Max, I was out with him on Friday night, so I know him and Simon were really looking forward to going. But Villa have found a way to win a game, and again, for me, that's a bigger story than conceding offset pieces.
Of course it is. Winning the game. If you're talking about the 3 goals that Villa score rather than the 2 they concede, if you win 3-2 every single week, you're absolutely delighted. So it's funny, isn't it? Because a couple of years ago, Villa were one of the clubs that were very, very much against 5 sub rule, because at that point in time they were new to the Premier League and they felt that it favoured the real bigger teams who had bigger squads with better quality players. But you've seen the advantages of it at the weekend. They were able to bring £75 million of talent off the bench to go and win the game. Diaby, lovely cross into the box for Digne. And I thought that Digne made a difference because when he came on, he was pushing forward, a lot. He was way higher than Moreno. And that was just putting Luton a little bit on the back foot. And at that point, if you remember, everything was coming down their right side. So it kind of switched things around and it just made Luton think a little bit differently, I thought. And look, a real bit of quality. I was a little bit concerned about Eric Boone, and he kept giving away fouls as well, didn't they? I don't know if you noticed, as soon as he came on, he was one of the 4 that came on.
But he gave away to grips with the pace of the game, didn't he? A little bit, I thought, which is understandable.
I think Barkley went round him quite easily, and then he pulled him down, and I thought, oh my word, another free kick to defend from this area, But yeah, look, when you can bring players like Musa who have cost you £75 million off the bench to change the game, it's going to help, isn't it? And it was great for Villa. Yeah, I watched Max's video this morning and looked a real fun away there.
Yeah, but hope now that can turn something for Diaby. Fair play to him because he didn't have much time to make an impact at all. He did the same in the Bournemouth game. Away, he was on the bench and he came on late and he swung in across, and only Watkins scored a header. So I think that's something, for someone who's not taking heat because he isn't, but he's having a tough time at the moment. He's out of the team after a brilliant start. I think if you're coming on and making a difference, sometimes as a footballer on the bench, that's all you can do. And credit to him and credit to his attitude. It's just a huge 3 points, isn't it? Because Tottenham won at the week, and at one point it was looking like that they were going to drop points, and then suddenly the next thing I know it was 3-1. It sets us up nicely for the massive, probably one of the biggest games at Villa Park ever Sunday, isn't it? That is a huge game.
Yeah, it's going to be a good game. I'm actually really looking forward to seeing how the 2 teams set up against each other and how good, are Villa better than Tottenham? Are Tottenham better than Villa? Who's got the the head start over each of them. It'd be really interesting. Should be quite a fun game of football, actually, for neutrals also watching on, because two teams who like to have a little bit of a go and will play attacking front foot football. So yeah, it'll be fun. And look, it's great to be a Villa fan, isn't it, at the moment? Great for those supporters who are going to games. A last minute winner at Luton, a stadium probably some fans haven't ever been to, going to Ajax in midweek, and a great away day in Amsterdam, the big game against Tottenham, and then another one under the lights at Villa Park against Ajax in the return leg. That's what. If you're a Villa fan, you're buzzing, aren't you, at the moment?
Yeah, people like Max and Simon, they'll be at every single one of those games, and they're going to have a brilliant time. I've said previously, there's fans that have followed Villa up and down the country, up and down pre-season tours in various countries abroad as well. These are the times now that they really, really deserve, and that they're really going to enjoy. We won't talk about the Ajax match because we'll do a preview show in the week to cover that, and we like to try and keep these pods to around 40 minutes, and we've managed to do that, Greg. But is there anything else you would like to talk about? I've noticed since you've gone to Thailand, your feature has dropped off a cliff. Your Tales from the Archive, or whatever it was called.
God, I couldn't even remember that. I forgot about that myself. Yeah,
that's dropped off a cliff completely, hasn't it? Since you've gone to Thailand, it was good. Yeah, if we had tales from Greg Evans' golf courses or Greg Evans' holidays, we'd have an array of stories every week, wouldn't we? But
they'd be at the start rather than the end.
Yeah, throughout the whole podcast. Then I did see your awful shot this morning whilst I was on the toilet scrolling my phone. Awful golf shot, the sound no one wants to hear. I did say that.
Oh my word! Yeah, I've been struggling the last couple of weeks, to be honest. I think I've played too much golf. Sometimes, any golfer who knows this. Sometimes when you play a bit too much, you start remembering all the bad things. And whereas if you go a couple of weeks and you don't play, it's like a clean slate. Yeah. So I'm having a week off, and I'm going to be starting again next week.
I mean, you've played more golf this year than Rory McIlroy, Tiger Woods, and all the other golfers put together. So I think it is about time that you do have a break. But thank you ever so much for joining me on the show today, Greg. Always a pleasure to converse with you, and we will of course be back next Monday as well to talk about the Tottenham game. There'll be a preview show for Ajax in the week, and of course a preview show for Tottenham as well. So watch out for that. The best way to know when those videos are coming are to subscribe wherever you are taking in the podcast. And if you're watching on YouTube, make sure you give us a like. Let's try and get 500 likes this week on this show, and you leave us some comments as well with how you're finding the shows and whether you agree with the points that we are making. So yeah, wherever you are taking in this podcast, please do all the things that help us. Subscribe, reviews even on Spotify and Apple. Those things really, really help us. So if you could do that, if you're enjoying the show, that would be really good. If you can't hear us, then don't do any of those things because we don't deserve it, quite frankly. But hopefully we have sorted out this issue this week. Once again, thanks to Greg, thanks to everyone for watching and listening, and only one thing left to say: up the Villa.